This is the talk show that takes a no-holds-barred approach to politics, where truth and integrity are the standard and the Constitution honored. From Renaissance Studios, this is Champion News Talk Radio.
Good morning, and welcome to another great edition of Champion News Talk Radio, brought to you by championnews.net, your choice for the conservative voice. This is Carol Parisi reporting with our founder, Jack Roser. And this morning we have a very special guest from out of state, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Curtis Bowers, actually former Representative Curtis Bowers. Good morning, Mr. Bowers. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. Good morning, Mr. Roser. How are you today?
Oh, fine as toads there. Mr. Bowers, where were you representative?
In Idaho, in the state representative there in Idaho.
In Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
How long you been in Illinois?
Well, just a couple days here, and we were kind of traveling through our whole family as we're promoting this film around the country in a bunch of different locations.
How do you feel good about being in the state that's got the reputation for being the most crooked state of all 50?
We've been locking our bus's door every night very tightly.
Good idea. Well, that's if you're parked anywhere near the politicians of Illinois,
right.
The Democrats, that is, be very wise. But we're the most broke, and we're the most crooked state of all 50. Quite a reputation Illinois has gotten.
Well, you know, it's very interesting. Mr. Bauer's story is very interesting. Just take me back to 1992, real quick. If you could let our listeners hear a little bit about where you were in 1992 and how this light bulb came on for you, just a couple minutes, so they have an understanding of what your movie agenda is about.
Sure. Back in 1992, I had an opportunity to attend a meeting at University of California, Berkeley, and an older gentleman had asked me to go for him. The Communist Party USA was breaking off a new group called the Committees of Correspondence, and he said, I want you to go and just hear what they have to say, because of course in 1989, the Berlin Wall had come down. In 91, the Soviet Union had dissolved, and now this is the summer of 92, so he's like, everyone said communism is dead, so what are they up to? So I said, sure, it sounds fun. So I went to the meeting. They carefully outlined an agenda of what they would like to do to kind of undermine our culture and take us down from within. And the way they talked about America is, it was hard to even know what they were talking about, as if it was such an evil, wicked, unfair country, and we've got to stop them from doing, we have to destroy this country because it's so evil. And they kind of laid out a plan there. It didn't sound like very realistic to me, and so I sent the notes and the tapes to the gentleman who had paid for my way there to go, and got on with my life, and didn't really think about it again until 16 years later, when I was a representative in Idaho, and we had a lot of legislation that was coming through, and businessmen were calling me and saying, "Don't pass that; it's going to wreck these environmental regulations. They're going to wreck my business." And all of a sudden, the light bulb went on. I hadn't thought of that meeting in 16 years. And I remembered one of the key things they had said is, we want to use the environmental movement to destroy the free markets in America. And in 92, my mind being a 25-year-old or so, I couldn't even understand how you would do that. But of course, by 2008, An Inconvenient Truth had just come out, and the global warming thing was the biggest, issue in the entire world. And I realized, wow. Somehow, it seems very unlikely, but they have been able to push this into the forefront, to use this as a tool to promote the socialist America they want. And so that was one of the first times my eyes were open to what was going on.
So you started connecting dots and started to dig deeper. I did find a lot about the movie to be compelling, and much to what Mr. Roser was saying, as Illinois being the most corrupted state. Is it any surprise that Saul Alinsky came from here, and Saul Alinsky's teachings were studied by Cloward and Piven, and is that coincidental?
No, and it's not coincidental that Obama chose, anywhere he could have come in America, he chose to come to Chicago because his mentor, his childhood mentor, who was a man named Frank Marshall Davis, who was a member of the Communist Party, and he talks about in his own book, Dreams of My Father, he had moved to Chicago in the 1940s and joined the Communist Party here. So that's where all his connections were. So as soon as Obama got old enough, he moved to this area to connect up with all his childhood mentors' friends, Frank Marshall Davis, who were right out of Chicago as well.
So I guess there's no coincidence as to why we have one of the most corrupted states, right, Jack?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm an old guy. I'll be 89 this summer. And so I've seen a lot of the communist thing, and due to my father's intelligence, he pointed out to me what was going on way back in the 1930s when I was in high school. And I mentioned to him that to each according to their need, from each according to their ability. I mentioned that to my father, who did not hit me, but he straightened me out that that was a communist slogan.
Where did that come from?
The Communist Manifesto.
And where did you learn that?
Well, I heard it in high school, and my father learned it because way back before World War I, that'd be somewhere around 1913 or 14, my father was running a logging camp up in northern Wisconsin, and the IWW came down the tracks to organize his men. The IWW is the International Workers of the World, in those days called the Wobblies or the I Won't Works. And so my dad faced down those, what were the incipient communist movement before the manifesto really took off and took over Russia in 1917. So I wasn't born until 1923, but my father made me aware of what was going on. I heard Father Coughlin speaking on Sundays over our battery-powered radio in the 1930s. And so that was in the background of my head. And so I've been very aware of the communist conspiracy over a great many years, and fully aware of it and active in opposing it.
Well, you know, it's funny, though. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in the 60s. I grew up in the 70s, saw all the peace and love movement. My parents took us to Haight-Ashbury just to kind of look at these hippie folks and all of this. Grew up in a very Republican home. I was one of the only kids whose parents voted for Nixon in my very liberal area. But I voted for Ronald Reagan the first time he ran for president, and he won. And he beat communism. I remember being a kid, and we hated the Russians. We didn't like the Russians. They were communists. They were bad, and that's what we were taught in school. But 1988, 89, it's it. This is great. You know, happy days are here again. And I'm looking at your generation. You could be my dad, and my generation who grew up because of the hard work that your great generation did, and did that American dream, had it easier. And I was very ignorant to the fact that who would want communism? Why would somebody want this agenda? Why? Why? It's so the antithesis of our free will that is given to us, and it's the antithesis of liberty and freedom.
There's another thing that you didn't mention, but 1942, when the year that World War II started for the United States, I went and enlisted. I was just a couple of weeks into being 19 years old. I enlisted in the Army, and I did 3 years as mostly as a private, partly as a corporal. I got busted from corporal. But anyway, I did my trick in the Army, and I saw a lot of what life was like in the South Pacific, and as among the first troops after the end of the war. Out of the Philippines, we went into Japan, so I saw that society too. I've scraped food out of my mess kit into a little tin can of starving children taking our garbage because they would need it for food. I've seen that, and I didn't see that ever in America or anything near it, because the kindness and the generosity of the American people is legendary in the whole world, and certainly in this country. I've never seen anything near a starving person or a starving child. It's impossible to be without medical care or anything else in America because of the generosity of the family and of the people. We don't need an all-seeing government because we got the family in America. We got decent Americans following the precepts of our very smart founders, which today are being upheld by the Tea Party movement. They're people of value, and that's America. We're generous, and for many years we've been the envy of the world because all of our ancestors came here to get away from crooked or communist or socialist governments. That's
Right.
what built America. We ought to know better than to let those people grow up and take over power in America.
But you know something? I think that there is an agenda that a lot of us that are living our lives just don't know about. Let's hear more about it when we come back after the break.